Albert Einstein famously said, "Everything is energy, and that's all there is to it." This isn't philosophy, it's physics. The science of physics defines energy as the capacity to do work. Regardless of the form that's used, energy literally is what powers everything we do in life. Curtail any of what's in use today, and the entire system begins to weaken. At Sustainable Energy Hawaii, we believe it's essential our community have a greater overall understanding about energy. Due to the climate emergency, major decisions are currently being made about our energy future. The question of whether they're sustainable over the long term isn't really a discussion we've had in depth yet. To that end, we're convinced geothermal has a prominent role to play in our energy future. Today, there's a race to decarbonize the global economy. The lion's share of this effort is focused on solar and wind in combination with battery storage. All of these are valuable, essential, and achievable near-term solutions. At SEH, we wholeheartedly support these efforts. However, we know that solutions with longer life cycles are critical as well. Hawaii has very different energy challenges compared to those being confronted on the large continental land masses. Each Hawaiian island is small, isolated, and the physical space that can be devoted to renewable energy production is limited or in conflict with other public, private, or cultural interests. None of our islands have interconnected grid systems, and the relatively small size for each power plant keeps them from enjoying the economies of scale seen elsewhere in the world. These conditions and more contribute to the high price we all pay for power. To put the potential of geothermal power into context, we should take a broad look at the basics of energy and then evaluate our expectations as humanity goes through its first major energy transition in more than a century. At the outset, it's important we understand that not all energy is created equal. By this I mean we use distinctly different types of energy to satisfy different needs, each requiring different concentrations of raw power. Broadly, there are three well-defined forms of energy used to support civilization as we know it. For example, we have one form that's specifically used for transportation, another that powers static infrastructure, such as our homes, commercial buildings, and public spaces, and then a third, often left out of the energy category altogether, food. Transportation is primarily powered by petroleum and tends to come in various types of liquid fuel. Gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and marine gas oil are good examples. Even with the advent of EVs, 96% of all transportation used to move people and goods around the world is still powered by liquid, petroleum-based fossil fuels. Today, there is no alternative at scale. Solar cannot power container ships. Windmills cannot power the mining equipment needed to secure the raw materials used to build renewable systems in the first place. This should begin to illustrate the scale needed to transform global energy supplies to renewables, especially if continuous growth on a finite planet remains the default business model. Our second energy type is electric power. At its most basic, generating electricity has been very simple. We've just needed some kind of continuous flowing force to spin a turbine generator. In recent history, that's come from burning fossil fuels like coal, natural gas, or petroleum to produce the heat needed to boil water. That in turn produces pressurized steam that spins power-generating turbines. Current data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration shows that 61% of U.S. power production still comes from fossil fuels. The remaining 39% are renewables and comes from a mix of hydro, nuclear, wind, solar, and biofuels. Even though renewable energy growth is quite strong, it's only projected to satisfy a little more than half of the growth in overall energy demand during 2021 and 2022. The rest will come from increased fossil fuel use. The third type of energy I want to discuss today is the energy that powers you and me and all of our domesticated animals, food. Today, it's estimated that 90% of the food consumed across the Hawaiian Islands arrives by petroleum-powered cargo ships. Virtually all that food is grown using some combination of equipment and fertilizers that is derived from fossil fuels. The existential crisis, that is, climate change, demands we rapidly replace our fossil fuel energy consumption with low carbon or no carbon alternatives. To be successful while being economically viable, our energy solutions must support the ability to move goods and people from place to place on an industrial scale. Currently, that ability is limited to liquid fossil fuels. It's the lifeblood of the global economy. One of the biggest hurdles in meeting our climate mitigation goals is that liquid fuels contain more concentrated power than solar, wind, biofuels, or any electric alternative for that matter. Liquid fuels are readily portable, meaning that they can be conveniently used to power mobile equipment of any size or weight. Refueling this equipment is rapid and is standardized around the world. By comparison, the electric power systems used for transportation today require longer refueling times than their liquid counterparts, and the physical weight of the battery systems limit the size of the vehicles and equipment they can effectively power. While we expect this situation to improve, these are the conditions we face right now. Still, effectively scaling a new system to this degree will likely be the biggest hurdle of all. Today's battery systems are also dependent on many rare earth minerals, which have a known limitation to their availability. Geopolitically, these critical raw materials will increasingly play a strategic security role in the politics between nations. As we decarbonize, it's also critical that we find an affordable alternative to producing high-temperature heat, something that's essential to many of the industrial processes needed to manufacture these renewable systems themselves. So from the mining of minerals to the transporting of large renewable energy systems to delivering the thousands of EVs we're counting on to reduce our carbon footprint, none of that occurs today without fossil fuels playing a prominent role all along the supply chain. All this points to a reality that is a set of very sharp double-edged swords. Climate mitigation on the one hand and the global economy on the other, and crucial renewable energy in the middle. Simply put, today's biophysical reality, where there really is a limit to growth, seems to be banking on the continued availability of affordable, non-renewable resources. So what do? Who's going to pay for all the changes we need? How much time do we have before we reach the tipping point separating success and failure? These are questions that do not have simple answers. Just looking at the time factor, it seems the unspoken conventional wisdom surrounding the world's renewable energy transition is this. If we fall behind the schedule we've set for ourselves, we can just keep doing what we've always done. Continue using fossil fuels a little bit longer. There's a big catch to this, though. Fossil fuel supplies are finite too. At this point in history, we're seeing the practical limit to how much can be supplied on a daily basis. At SEH, the energy resource data we've studied credibly indicates the tight supplies we're experiencing today is more than a short-term issue, but one that will continue well into the future. Each day there's news about energy shortages around the world. We see it impacting Europe, Asia, and the United States too. Global energy demand is increasing to historic highs with no let-up in sight. As fossil fuel demand surpasses available supplies, logically, it will become more expensive, driving up the price of everything else along with it. Everything. We've all seen what's happened to gas prices over the last year. We know what's happened to the price of other goods, too. It's common sense that with the interdependence between fossil fuels and the production of renewable energy systems, the cost of those systems will rise, too. We also know the infrastructure the world is counting on to provide the added power to fuel our growing EV demand is in desperate need of update, upgrade, and expansion. For example, we know the lifespan of today's solar, wind, and battery systems range from 15 to 30 years. As I mentioned earlier, each of these is built using rare earth metals, many of which may not remain available at the scale or price needed to continuously retool the entire planet's energy systems into the second half of the 21st century. At Sustainable Energy Hawaii, we're convinced the time for long-term thinking is now. We believe our future energy needs must be viewed not just from a climate mitigation perspective, but also from that of local resilience, sustainability, and from one spanning a multi-generational time frame. To that end, we see a rare, indigenous, essentially limitless source of heat, one our community could choose to respectfully and responsibly transform long-term into usable modern energy. Logistically, that source of heat doesn't need to be imported. It doesn't have to be purchased from a global oil company. It doesn't emit carbon into the atmosphere. Its system's construction uses largely common base metals in its design, and this heat exists under the very islands on which we make our homes. Our geothermal energy supply being constant means the price for the heat it offers won't change over time. This is where we're convinced that our indigenous, steady-state geothermal resource can make a real difference to our lives long term. This could also be the means to support the production of affordable, green hydrogen and jumpstart a new local industry. Every industrialized nation around the world is pursuing the production of green hydrogen. It can serve as a replacement for many functions battery power cannot satisfy efficiently. That includes powering heavy machinery, ocean-going freighters, and even high-capacity airships. This indicates that the export market for affordable green hydrogen has great potential if it can be produced at scale. The benefits of hydrogen are many. It's another way to store electricity, like we do with batteries, but in greater volumes and for longer periods of time. Producing affordable hydrogen has the potential to support local production of nitrogen-rich agricultural ammonia, a necessary ingredient for successful, productive farming. It's also a viable quality source for generating high-temperature industrial heat. With access to that heat, we have the potential to process basalt at scale for local building materials and other products for export. Unlike solar or wind, geothermal energy is a firm, 24/7, 365 power source that doesn't require backup storage. It has a smaller physical footprint per generated gigawatt hour than either solar or wind farms. We believe to properly explore the benefits geothermal power might offer, it will take those in our community, all of whom have a stake in the decisions being made for us today, to collectively voice how we want to live and what we want to leave for future generations. The geothermal conditions that exist here, especially on Hawaii Island, are very special and very rare. We are incredibly lucky to have this amazing resource available when the rest of the world is looking for long-term energy solutions too. Mahalo.